Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo. With your host, Patrick Moran.
A Buffalo Sabres season preview. The season starts quite literally tomorrow. Tons of Buffalo Bills, Houston, Texas talk. A big game this week. A lot going on here on this packed episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you, as always, to everyone out there for watching and for listening, for following, for subscribing. I appreciate y'all very much. Real quick, before we get cooking with today's episode, I got PK from the Buffalo Sports Collective. Like I said, Buffalo Sabres preview, Bills, Houston Texans. Just a big week with Buffalo Sports that we're going to get into in just a second. A lot of you out there, you ask me all the time, like, how can I support the show? We don't have a Patreon. We don't have a paid Substack, no insider text line, none of that stuff. Very simple. Just subscribe. And I know a lot of you more and more recently, and I love it, have been subscribing on the YouTube channel. And again, I appreciate that. I love that. But I want you to do something. If you are subscribed only on the video side, go to Spotify or go to Apple, and also make sure you follow Talking Buffalo on there. Because what we're doing now going forward is most of these full-length episodes will always be available on the video side. We're also going to start doing some exclusive YouTube stuff that will only be there on YouTube. But the only way you're going to get every single episode of Talking Buffalo in its entirety is by subscribing on the audio side. And we're also going to be doing some bonus episodes, some weekend episodes here and there that are going to be audio only. So if you're a fan of the show, you want to support, and you haven't done so already, even if you are a subscriber on YouTube, please make sure to go on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts, and just make sure you follow us there, because there'll be something unique on both the video and the audio side going forward. So anyway, now that I got that out of the way, I am joined by a good buddy, a recurring guest at this point, PK from the Buffalo Sports Collective. Man, what's going on? How you doing? There's a big week, man. I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty sure you are as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you got your 6 slip 30 filled out for the 1:00 game on Friday, but I think there's going to be a few people that are going to be entering the weekend a little bit early because of the excitement with the Sabres.
Well, let's put it this way. I have a second part-time job, and I usually go into work at about 4:00 on Friday. Probably going to be at least a little bit late getting there, because there's no way I am missing this game. And yeah, there's excitement building. I kind of get a good sense of it on social media over the last few days. It's kind of crept up, though. You know what I mean? It's kind of come out of nowhere because the Bills, the first month of the season, you know how that goes with the Buffalo Bills. It's funny. My guy, Joe Marino from Lockdown Bills, as good as it gets on the football side, doesn't know shit about the Sabres. I tweeted something about, just being excited about the season starting, and he asked, why should I be excited besides the head coach? And I tried explaining to him, and we're going to talk about this, bottom 6 forwards. I just think that's a dramatically improved area of this team. He didn't know what that meant. And even when I explained it to him, he still could not grasp the concept of the bottom 6 forwards, which is remarkable to me, because there's nothing about football that Joe Marino does not know. You know what I mean? And he's so good at articulating his thoughts, but to sit there and not even know what the bottom 6 is in hockey, to me, I don't know, it just caught me off guard is kind of wild. But we're going to talk about that, PK. Let's start here. And again, we're going to talk Sabres. We are going to talk Buffalo Bills second half of the show for sure. Houston, Texas, again, a big game. So much going on with the Bills. This could have easily been an all Bills episode that we could have filled, no problems. But with the Sabres starting tomorrow, 1 p.m. on Friday, overseas, of course. Let's start here, man. I want you to talk a little bit about the new identity that you expect Lindy Ruff to bring to this team. That fourth line, obviously, physically on the ice, I think is going to be different than what we've seen. But just a team last year, I thought that was a little bit soft, and not necessarily even so much on the ice, but also kind of like in the locker room when it came to taking accountability. And I want you to speak on this a little bit too, because if nothing else, I'm confident that Lindy Ruff is not going to let players get away with lacking accountability. He's going to hold players accountable, and you're going to expect to see players hold themselves a lot more accountable than kind of what I sensed last year with Don Granato. So kind of talk about how you think, Lindy Ruff's going to help form, even though he's coming back, he's been here before, but it's going to be a new identity with the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, I think the beginning of training camp and the preseason was kind of a shell shock to some of these players who have not been coddled, but have never been pushed in the NHL before, like the Tage Thompsons, the Peterkas, the Cousins, and so on and so forth, where I think a lot of these players going into the start of last year kind of were expecting what happened the year prior, where they went on that hot streak and just barely missed the playoffs, to continue. And I don't think any of them were expecting to face some adversity in playing. I think they were all kind of just expecting, okay, what happened at the tail end of last year is going to continue into this year. I think the top word that you use is accountability. And I think that's exactly what's going to be shown here is nobody's going to get a free ride to me on this team. And I think you saw exactly the kind of accountability this team's going to have with the bottom six shakeup, because I think the bottom six are going to be grinders. They're going to be players that are going to be hard to play against, which is going to make it easier for the top six to play, because the players are going to get all grounded, are going to get all tired out from having to face the McLeods, the Laffertys, the Malensteins, and so on and so forth, where it's just going to be annoying to play those bottom six guys. So I am expecting and hoping, and I am reserving some judgment because we've gone 13 years saying
Sure.
this the next season, but it just feels a bit different this year. And yes, maybe I'm just buying into the craze of Lindy Ruff's back, but it feels there's a different feeling towards this team coming in, where it's not like high expectations where it's Stanley Cup. It's not even, hey, are they going to be in the top three of their division? But it does feel like this team legitimately has a chance to be a playoff type team, and a team that people actually want to watch, which is something that we haven't seen for a full season in I don't know how long.
Well, let me say this, okay? I know you're excited to get this season going. I certainly am. But we're not old enough to have lost our memory completely. Because if we had this conversation 12 months ago to this date, the excitement level was through the roof. I mean, this was a team that came within 2 points of making the playoffs the year before that. They were a borderline juggernaut offensively. And it certainly felt like the next step was going to be to end the drought. Here we are 12 months later, and you have a new head coach, and it's Lindy Ruff who's back. And again, a dramatic shakeup on the bottom six, which I'll tell you this, even just, following camp and while I watched that preseason game in Germany, and I've been impressed with everything I've seen, what I've read from a lot of people who covered the team. I got to say this, going into the summer, into the off season, I was hell bent on you got to go get yourself a top six guy. It's got to happen. Whoever that may be, there's so many names you could throw out there. Pat Gaines, a name that I thought of, lots of names, you know what I mean? Trades, whatever it may take. And I look at this roster right now, and I'm starting to, and we'll see how things play out, but I am starting to appreciate, because the bottom six sounds boring. It's like, well, you're not going to, how much are you really going to move the needle because the bottom six is forward? Well, I'm starting to believe plenty, which I didn't necessarily believe before. That Malenstein, Lafferty, Ob Coble, am I pronouncing his name right? I'm sure I'm going to be saying it a lot over the next handful of weeks, but that line looks really good. And he got that line together relatively quickly. It looks like that's a line that's going to play big, physical, fast. And before we talk about the offense, which we'll get into, but I do think that's going to be a line that really sets the tone. And then one more question too, because it's not the third line, it's still the bottom six. That Ryan McLeod trade, I'm starting to feel that trade. I don't necessarily love it at first, so I certainly understood you got to give up a good prospect to get him. But seems like he's going to bring a lot of juice in that third line. And he's also going to do some other things. Like he might take some critical faceoffs late in games and things like that of that nature as well. But the bottom six, PK, doesn't just seem like just talk. It seems like it is going to make some difference to this team. And I never really bought into that, but I kind of sort of am now.
Yeah, I mean, it's also nice that it's fresh names too. You're not running back the same bottom six that you've had, the Oposos, the
True.
Fergusons, so on and so forth. But yeah, the McLeod deal at face value when it first came through, you're going, okay, you move Matthew Savoy, who is one of the top prospects in the system. What are you doing here? But you go back and you think about the whole system, the whole prospect system they have.
Mhm.
There's not room for all these players, so you can afford to a bit overspend, if you will, on paper. Now, looking at this, I think McLeod's going to have a giant role on this team. Like you mentioned, critical faceoffs. That was one of the things that Lindy Ruff mentioned that this team needs to improve in is faceoff win percentage. And if he's able to take those critical draws late in games and win that possession to get the puck out of the end, that's great. A two-way centerman is something that was desperately needed on this team as well, because I think it takes a little of the weight off of Dylan Cousins, where Dylan Cousins was supposed to be that two-way centerman that can play defense and get those points. I think McLeod on that third line, I think that third line is going to be a very important line moving forward. With fourth line, you know what you're going to not you know what you're going to get, but you know what to expect from that fourth line. They're going to be hitters. They're going to be grinding out the game. They're going to be going against some of the top lines in the NHL to just tire them out. But this third line is going to be an important line for this team if they do want to get over that hump and make the playoffs. And I think it starts with McLeod.
It's it would be a great story, of course, if the Sabres make the playoffs. Quick little left turn here, PK, unscheduled left turn. When you were talking, and we're recording this, I got to say this, it's about 5:30 p.m. On Wednesday. We're recording this for a Thursday episode. And I just peeked over at the Major League Baseball scores because the playoffs are going on. And the Detroit Tigers in the ninth inning now are up on Houston 5-2 and on the verge of knocking Houston out of the playoffs. You want to talk about a great story. The Detroit Tigers making the playoffs is a great story. Came kind of out of nowhere. I mean, they were sellers at the trade deadline, man. They traded a great prospect. And now this team not only makes the playoffs, but they're 3 outs as we're recording this. I'm going to file for the rest of this episode. They're 3 outs away from eliminating the Houston Astros and moving on to the ALDS. That is just wild. How can I tie that into the Sabres? Well, it gives me hope, I guess, for the Buffalo Sabres. Anything can happen in sports. But anyway, I know we've talked a little bit about baseball before. I don't know how much of a big baseball guy you are. I used to be a huge baseball guy, but it's kind of fallen off. I just don't have the time to really get into it anymore. But I always kind of get into it a little bit more in their playoff time. That's awesome. Detroit on the verge, anyway, of beating Houston.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I used to be a big baseball guy. I watch, 130, 140 games when I was younger. And now doing this, having a full-time job, moving, having a wife, having dogs around the house, having this podcast, you kind of got to divert your attention sometimes. But yeah, playoff time, playoff baseball is some of the best watch if you have the time to do it, because every pitch is so critical.
It really does. And it doesn't feel like every pitch matters in the regular season. Most of it anyway. Every single pitch matters in the playoffs. Which, by the way, Detroit was up 1-0 for a while, and then Houston went up 2-1 in the seventh. I'm like, here it comes. But I don't know how, but somehow Detroit got up 5-2. Completely awesome. All right, anyway, back to the Sabres, what we hope will be a good story on the hockey side as well. Yeah, so look, they're going to be tougher. They're going to be grittier. The fourth line, the bottom six should be improved. New head coach, more accountability. All that stuff matters a ton. But I think what's going to matter more than anything else, like the biggest question on this team for me is, can Lindy Ruff reignite this offense again? This is an offense that scored, I looked it up, 50 more goals, exactly 50 more goals 2 years ago than they did last year. They scored 296 2 years ago, 246 this past year. On the individual side, Tage Thompson 2 years ago, 47 goals, dropped to 29 this past year. Alex Tuck had 36 2 years ago. He dropped down to 22 this past year. Dylan Cousins, 31 goals 2 years ago. He dropped down to 18. Darlene went from 73 points 2 years ago down to 59 last year. Hell, 2 years ago, they got 28 goals out of Victor Olofsson. So this was again, they couldn't play defense. They couldn't stop pucks, but they were an offensive juggernaut. Talk about just the importance of that. Like, can Lindy Ruff ignite this offense to be what it was 2 years ago? Because at the end of the day, it kind of feels like that young core of goal scorers is what it's ultimately going to be all about.
Yeah, I mean, going into last offseason, and this was something that I put on myself for not paying enough attention to and kind of hitting it home as enough as I should have. You were expecting a bunch of young guys to be what they were 2 years ago or exceed those expectations. And nearly all of them regressed. And
Mhm.
I don't think you're expecting them to have the same seasons that you had last year. And I don't think you're expecting them to have the same season you did 2 years ago, but somewhere in between. But I think the biggest difference that they really need to work on is the power play. And it went from 2 years ago where you were a 20 or ninth in the NHL, 23.4%, 0.1% behind eighth place to 16.6 and 28th in the league. If that
Right.
regresses even a little bit more to the mean, I think this offense can bounce back. The biggest worry is they didn't really replace the offensive 5-on-5 scoring that Jeff Skinner lost. Now, maybe that's the Jack Quinn role coming in, but you were expecting Jack Quinn to do that last year as well. So that's my biggest worry is if they do fix the power play and that does improve, that does help your chances. But Skinner was one of the best, and you can fault him on his effort or on the defensive end all you want. But 5-on-5 scoring, he was and is probably still one of the best 5-on-5 scorers in the entire league. And that is off your roster now. So hopefully that Jack Quinn role does take a big jump. You get another year of JJ Peterka in his third year. Hopefully he gets up and over 30 this year. But even just the power play, if they're able to fix the power play and get it even in the top half of the league, I think that will help your offense a bit if the other players do bounce back a little bit better than they did the year prior, like the Tage Thompsons, the Dylan Cousins, and so on and so forth.
Whether it's content creators like us, whether it's Sabres fans, we all have our depth charts. We've had them all summer going into camp. For the most part, I feel like it played out the way we expected. But were you a little bit surprised? All right, so day one, essentially, of training camp, Zach Benson's in that top six. I had the expectation going into camp that it was going to be Benson or Zucker. You know, that's the way it seemed to fit. One of those guys would be on the second line, one will be on the third. But from what I've seen anyway, it's been Benson the entire time, like all of camp, the preseason. I expected to see a little bit more, and this is not a complaint. So we're clear about this. I expected to see a little bit more of a fight between these two guys, but it's been relatively clear early on that it's going to be Benson at least getting the first opportunity to start the season in the top six. Zucker's a guy who he had 14 goals last year between Arizona and Nashville, but he had 27 goals 2 years ago with Pittsburgh. Were you a little bit surprised to see Benson get the nod right away in the top six? And he pretty much has been there and he stayed there. I mean, we'll see again. Hockey, you know how hockey goes, a couple bad shifts and you can be in the press box. Hell, man. But especially with Lindy Ruff. But right now to get the start the season, he's your top six guy.
I'm a little bit more relieved that it is him over Zucker. I was kind of going into this offseason thinking it was going to be Zucker's job to lose and Benson can hang out on the third wing and try to win his way mid-season back into the top six role. But I really like Benson's game in small pieces last year. I liked his grittiness. I liked his fear. He was fearful or fearfulness. It would go in front of the net. He would go into the corners. He was not afraid to battle when he's this short little guy, you know, one of the smallest ones on the ice all the time. He was one of the only ones that wasn't afraid of contact last year. So I'm a little bit surprised he's in the top six already. I'm a little bit surprised they just kind of, you know, went with him from the get-go. But, you know, he does have that potential and he did slide a bit further in the draft than I think a lot of people were expecting him. So if Cousins can unlock and be what he was, you know, 2 years ago, at least a part of what he was 2 years ago, if Jack Quinn can come back and flash more like he did last year in those limited sample size, put in Benson on that line, that effort guy who can just stand in front of the net and is not afraid of any kind of contact. I do think that second line could be very fun to watch. I'm a little bit worried of, and I understand why Peterka's on the top line now, but I'm a little bit worried separating that line of Cousins, Peterka, and Quinn, because you saw the best out of Cousins when he had Peterka and Quinn on the sides there. So that's a little bit worrisome, but I mean, you don't have another top 3 winger to put there. So it kind of defaults back to JJ Peterka. But I do like Benson. I think I'm still in the camp where I wish they would have brought in another top 6 guy. That's long gone at this point. So you're going to have to deal with what Benson or Zucker can provide. But giving Benson the first look, I do like that because he seems like a kind of Lindy Ruff type of player. He just lacks a bit of size for it.
Man, if that second line worked out, what a nice homegrown line that could be too with Cousins, Quinn, and Benson, just like it was 2 years ago, to your point with Peterka. All right, so you got McLeod, you got Zucker. I like that on the third line. And then you got Greenway. I don't know how you feel about that. Like, does he feel like a good fit to you to be on that line? How long does he last in this lineup? Obviously, he's got some grit, some toughness to him. Kind of feel like he lacks a little bit in the speed and skill department with those two guys. I don't know, man. Krebs, by the way, Peyton Krebs is the odd man out right now. At least start the year. Look, they'll get opportunities. Somebody's either going to play like shit or somebody's going to get hurt. He's going to have opportunities. But to start the year, Krebs is going to be in the press box tomorrow. And is Jordan Greenway on the third line? How do you feel about that fit with McLeod and with Zucker?
I've liked him in parts, and then the trade still boggles my mind. I don't think you got the type of player I think they wanted to when they shipped out, 2 second-round picks for him. Mm-hmm. He's in this final year before a UFA deal. I think he's your third-line winger until Kulich lights it up in Rochester, because if Kulich's lighting it up down there, I don't know how you keep him down there, especially if your NHL team is, 1, either looking for scoring, or 2, is in contention for a playoff spot. Where Greenway is, I at least like that he's in the bottom 6 rather than them trying to push him into the top 6, which I don't think he's ever going to be that role. But I do think that he gets that third line spot until Kulich is ready, or until he's lighting it up in Rochester. I think I can't see them keeping Kulich down there if he's just going crazy, or the NHL team is just, they need more depth scoring. So that's as long as I can see Greenway in this lineup right now. He could be trade bait, at the deadline. Either they're out of it or they want to get Kulich in and Greenway's just taking up space.
Yeah, it's so we spend a lot of time and we're talking about the grit. We're talking about the new coach. We're talking about a reformed, revamped bottom 6. We're talking about the significance of the top 6, the offense, returning to what they were 2 years ago. Kind of feels like an under the radar a little bit kind of topic is Owen Power. He's a huge factor, though. This is the number 1 overall pick in the draft a handful of years ago. Does Owen Power make the jump this year? I mean, the last 2 years, statistically, basically, he's the same player last year as he was 2 years ago. And it's not terrible by any means. I'll be clear about that too, but 6 goals last year, 33 points. He's a +8, playing nearly 23 minutes a game, kind of close to what he was 2 years ago. But he's going into year 3 as a full-time player now. He's turning 22 in a month. I'm ready to see a jump. You know what I mean? I'm ready to see a guy this is a top-line guy. And you see glimpses of it, I think, last year and the year before. Maybe a little bit more last year, even though the numbers necessarily weren't better. But how important is it for him to become, you drafted him number 1 overall. You got Dahlin, you got Owen Power. You need him to be, I'm not saying he's going to be another Dahlin, but he needs to be more than what he's been. Not that what he's been is bad, but it's not franchise, cornerstone piece to me anyway. What we've seen from him so far to this point.
Yeah, I got $8.35 million reasons why he needs to take that next step. He gets that pay bump this year, and he was a number 1 overall pick, and this is his 3rd full season coming into the league. He needs to be that second pairing defenseman behind Dahlin. This defense could be one of the strengths of this team, or it could be one of those positions where you had higher expectations and they just weren't able to meet it. You got Dahlin, Power, Samuelson, and Bo Byram as your top 4 defensemen. That should be a very solid top 4 defensive pair. And then you got your bottoms, your third pairing with Yoki Haru and probably Clifton or Kilbert. And I'm very interested to see how he spreads out the time between the top 4 defensemen here, because, I liked Yoki Haru's game for the most part last year, but he's going to be in that role of a third pairing defenseman where I think he's going to thrive in compared to having to play the top 4 minutes. So I do think Owen Power needs to take this next step this year. And I think it's expected of him to take it when you're making that amount of money, where you're taking up almost 10% of the cap on this team. You have to take that next step. Yes, I understand he's only going to be 22 years old, but I think this has been said in the past. It's a young team, but it's young on in the numbers. It's not young in games played. This is his third full season into this league. Yes, he's 22, but he needs to take that next step if this defense is supposed to reach the potential and going to reach the potential that I think they do have on this blue line pairing. All the pieces are back there. Everybody's got a partner now. And I think everybody's playing the roles that they're supposed to be playing. So I'm not expecting the jump, but I think it does need to happen. He needs to play a bit bigger than he has in the past. I know points are not all his thing, but I do think he could be a 40 to 45, maybe 50 point player. But I think it's more, he needs a bit more grit, and maybe Lindy Ruff can get it out of him.
You know, you talk about a lot of positive stuff, and it feels like this team was on the verge 2 years ago. They certainly were. Coming into last year, it felt they were, and that there would just be some tweaks that would need to be required. Well, things obviously didn't work out last year. But even with all the positive stuff that's going on right now with this team, or feel good vibes, I should say, based on a lot of factors, what would you consider, like, what is your biggest worry about this team this year? And then maybe you got a couple. I got one, but it's really layered. But I want to hear from you first. Like, what's your biggest worry about this team right now?
I really think it's what happens with Dylan Cousins. And I think you need him to carry that second line and be that distributor to the Jack Quinns and the Zach and the Bensons. And I'm not expecting him to put up the points he did 2 years ago. I don't think he's that type of player. I don't think he's an over 30 goal scorer, but I do think you need to get more of a two-way, more offensive-minded centerman on your second pairing, centerman. And if he's not able to rebound, you're locked into a long contract with a Dylan Cousins that you need him to perform. It's that simple. And he's off the top power play. I think that's a good thing. You got Jack Quinn and JJ Peterka on the top power play right now. But it really comes down to Dylan Cousins and the goal scoring. And then the only other thing is their mindset. Are they weak mentally, or can they adjust to the Lindy Ruff style? Because he's going to push them. He's going to hold them accountable, which you mentioned right off the bat. Can this team adapt to that? When you saw last year where this team got all sad because the fan base was yelling to fire Don Granato. They wouldn't raise their sticks to the crowd. That's weak mental. They're weak mentally last year. They need to strengthen. They need to get tougher in that department. If they can do that under Lindy Ruff, that's a positive. But I'm a little bit worried going in, if there's 3 losses strung together in November, are they able to bounce back, or are they going straight back to the mindset of, oh no, here comes all over again?
My biggest fear, and that's a good one, is a lot of things to be upbeat about. But at the same token, it feels like so many things have to go right for this team to make the playoffs. They have to be tougher. They have to respond more to Lindy Ruff than they did Granato. I think they will. But I'm just saying, these are things that need to happen. The offense, we talked about it. It needs to be a lot closer to what it was 2 years ago than what it was last year. They need Owen Power to take that next step. They need Samuelson to stay healthy. They need Jack Quinn to stay healthy. Zach Benson needs to show that he belongs in that top 6. And then, of course, we haven't even talked about this yet today, but the goaltending. UPL needs to be good like he was last year, or Devin Levi really needs to emerge. There's a lot that needs to happen, and someone, or maybe a few teams even, they're going to have to falter in the East. East is loaded, dude. Tampa, Washington, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, Philly, Detroit, Ottawa. Like, a couple of those teams need to underachieve, because like Boston, Florida, Carolina, the Rangers, New Jersey, those kind of feel like Eastern Conference locks to me right now. That's 5 of the 8 teams. They're going to be in the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you got to be in the top 3 of that. It's a loaded division, unlike football, which we're going to get into in just a few minutes here, where before the season started with the Bills, I'm like, I think the Bills need to go like 12-5 to win the AFC East. The way the AFC East is look over the first month of the year, the way Miami's toast, New England's New England, and the Jets look like a very mediocre football team right now. 10-7 might get it done. I don't know that you could just be all right and make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. It's just too loaded. Like you're not going to back into the playoffs with 90, 91 points. You're going to have to be better. So it's just like a lot of things need to go right for the Sabres to break that drought. It feels easier said than done because half the teams make the playoffs. But this is just a very loaded conference. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I hope people aren't listening to my positive view of this and think, oh, he's a homer. He's going to be picking them to make the playoffs. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. I think they can be in contention for the 7th, 8th seed, but you hit the nail on the head. There are so many elements that have to go right for this to go. The potential is there. We saw the goal scoring, and a lot of those players are back. We saw on paper that bottom 6 is improved. We saw what UPL can do, and we saw what the defense can do. They just haven't all put it together in the same season. So they could fall flat on their face. And I would not put it past them to just come crumbling back to earth and be another, 25th, 24th, 23rd team in the NHL. I wouldn't doubt if that happened. But I'm just looking at the head coach who wins everywhere he goes. I see the bottom 6 is improved. I'm finally a believer in UPL. So if they are finally able to put this thing all together, they're a 7th, 8th seed, which is, I'm talking like they might be like a 1, 2, 3 seed. I'm not even betting on that, but I do think the talent is there and the potential is there for them to break the drought and get that 7th, 8th seed if everything's put together. And they have the possibility and the potential to do it. It's just they haven't been able to do it yet. Maybe this is the season, and maybe the head coach that got rehired for this team is the coach that can finally put all the pieces together.
After the Bills got stomped by the Ravens, one of the questions that we were talking about or examining was if you would have said the day before the season that the Bills, they will get smoked in Baltimore, but they're going to be 3-1 after 4 games, would you sign up for it? And I think you'd have to be a lunatic to say no. If I ask you this right now, PK, the Sabres will make the playoffs. They'll be a 7th or 8th seed, and they're going to get smoked and stomped out in the first round. You got to sign up for that today. You can either take that and it happens, or maybe they go further, or maybe they don't make the playoffs at all. But if I were to pose that question to you, the Sabres are going to make the playoffs, and they're going to get curb stomped by whoever, Boston, New Jersey, whatever. It doesn't even matter. But they're going to get like beat bad in the first round. Would you, if you had to be offered that today, would you take it?
I wasn't of legal drinking age the last time the Buffalo Sabres made the playoffs. Yes. Where do I sign up? I don't care if they get smoked. I don't care if the playoffs are canceled. I don't care what happens. This team has to make the playoffs for everybody's sanity, for my sanity, my hope. I went through my entire 20s of not seeing a playoff hockey team in Buffalo. It has to happen. Like, yes, I'll sign up for whatever. You could tell me they're the 8th seed. They made it on the last day because another team, lost in a shootout. I don't care. I don't care if they get smoked in all 4 games and they get blown out. I'll sign up for an 8th seed. They get smoked out of the playoffs and they don't make it the following year. Just break this drought.
I am 1,000% on board with you. I will spend the next October, November, December, January, February, March, 6.5 months or so following hockey daily, talking about it several times per week on this show, just to see them sneak into the playoffs. And before game 1, when they're on the road against Carolina, the vibe in Buffalo, the party in the plaza that'll happen downtown, people, if you're in your 20s, mid-20s, you're not even old enough to remember that shit. That kind of vibe, I would spend the next 6.5 months just following this team every day just to get that one day before game 1 of a playoffs. And I would do that in a second. By the way, I was looking up some odds. At The Athletic projects them at 89 points this year and a 30% chance of making the playoffs. FanDuel has them at plus 164 to make the playoffs. And BetMGM in Vegas has them at plus 170. So obviously not a monumental climb, but certainly a climb for the Bills, the Sabres, a little bit of a reach to make the playoffs. Less Sabres, they can take a break, and then we'll talk some Bills Texans. Want you to give me as little as one up to like maybe even three, whatever you want to do, but a bold prediction or two or three, whatever, for the Buffalo Sabres this season. Like, give me something, man. Give me something juicy, something that myself and everyone who's listening or watching can chew on.
Yeah, we did this on our show that aired today. We did our top 3 bold predictions for the season.
Okay.
I'll give you 2 of the 3 that I did there, and I changed the last one for you. Power play gets in the top 8 of the league. I do think they can fix this. I do like them putting Peterka and Quinn on the top pairing, getting Skinner off that, getting Cousins off that. I do think their power play, it can't be worse. It almost can't be worse than last year, so it has to get better. So maybe that's not as bold, but maybe putting them in the top 8 is bold. UPL, I think he's going to be the top dog in net. He's going to prove me wrong either by this bold prediction or, me saying that he should have been traded for a 7th round pick last offseason. I think he's going to finish top 8 in save percentage and goals against. And I think the team as a whole is going to finish the top 10 of goals against average. And then my last one here that I changed up, I think that I'm not predicting them to make the playoffs, but I do believe that this team will be in a playoff spot to start the month of April. And that's pretty much all we can really hope for as we're sitting here on October 3rd, that come April, we'll have a actual playoff race that we can get excited about as the springtime weather comes out.
It'll be fun. I got 3 for you. Okay. One of them I would consider a contradiction of sorts to what you said. One of them is something that we actually, you brought up and already talked about. I predicted it, maybe a little bit step further, but number one, I think Jack Quinn's going to stay healthy. I think he's going to score 30 goals this year. So I think Jack Quinn's a 30-goal scorer. Number 2, you talked about Yuri Kulik. I think he's going to be up by Thanksgiving for good because I think Peyton Krebs is going to get dealt relatively early in the season. I'm going to call Thanksgiving. Peyton Krebs is going to get traded. Greenway's going to be that guy in the press box. If everybody can stay healthy, knock on wood. And I think Kulik is going to be on this team, playing on that third line with McLeod and Zucker by Thanksgiving. Maybe Krebs doesn't get traded, but I'm going to say Kulik is up here for good by Thanksgiving. Last one, man, I suppose both of them could be true. I got Devin Levi getting at least 35 starts in net this year. So if he does, that's still 47 potential starts out there for UPL. Maybe it'll both be good, but I think that this is going to be a year where Devin Levi starts to emerge. Let's not forget, it wasn't that long ago where this guy was one of the top goalie prospects in the sport. And maybe this is a year where you start to see it a little bit more. So I'm going to go 35 starts, minimum 35 starts in net for Devin Levi. I suppose it's possible Levi could do that, and UPL could still be one of the better goalies in the league.
Yeah, I definitely do think that Levi is going to get around the 30 to 35 games played because UPL is not going to be playing all of them. It's the James Reimer rule. I still think that they might do not the 3 goalies, but I think because Levi can go down to Rochester, I think they'll call him up on the West Coast trips. I think they'll call him up on the back-to-back games. I think Reimer is really the 3rd goalie on this team. But I think for the breakdown of this roster, I think it's best to have him as the backup until you need to call up Levi and play him in those situations. So to me, I think that's the best way to handle a Levi situation because right now it's UPL's net. And I think he deserves it until you see otherwise. But I do believe in the small bits that we saw of Levi in the NHL last year and definitely the bits that we saw in him in the AHL last year. I think he's ready. I think he just got bit by UPL that just came out of nowhere and is just a stud in net now.
All right, I am back here with PK from the Buffalo Sports Collective. And by the way, the Detroit Tigers are on to the ALDS. They sweep Houston 2-0. A second-round matchup, Houston and the Cleveland Guardians. Almost said the old name. They're the Cleveland Guardians. I keep forgetting that. But, man, that's good for baseball, dude. Detroit, Cleveland in the playoffs. That means either Kansas City or Baltimore is going to be playing the Yankees in round 2. Kansas City's up 1-0 in the 5th. I don't know if we'll still be recording before that game's over. But if Kansas City wins that game, that series is over and they go on to play the Yankees, which, by the way, only old asses like myself would know this, but the Yankees and the Royals used to play in the playoffs all the time. Like in the late 70s, early 80s, when I was a little kid, I remember that the Yankees would own the Royals in the playoffs in the AL. That's back when only two teams would make the playoffs. But anyway, yeah, it's just really good. Kansas City even being in the playoffs, all that shit is just really good for baseball. Anyway, all right, let's switch gears here. Football. Before we get into the Texans game specifically, although this will affect it and the next 3 games beyond that, Von Miller gets suspended for 4 games. I'm surprised only because of the timing. I'll say on the record the same thing I've been saying on Twitter. I think it's deserved. I think what he did warranted a suspension. In fairness, though, if you are a Von Miller staunch supporter as a human being, not just as a football player, no charges were ever filed. That should matter, I think. But nonetheless, this guy and his history and what he did is warranted a 4-game suspension, regardless. And by the way, the writing was on the wall when they redid that contract too. The way they converted his salary so he would lose so much less money in game checks because of that, and help the Bills out. It was kind of a help me, I'll help you situation out with the team. So yeah, the writing was on the wall with that. But what are your thoughts right now? The timing and Von Miller, who's been really good, at least the first 3 games, he was a big factor for this team, and now he's out for the next 4 weeks. That's a blow to the Bills defense. It's already hurting with injuries to their personnel.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard it, I actually thought that it was performance enhancing because of how well he's looked this year compared to last year. But it definitely is deserved. Everything that has come out about it, what we heard last year, it's definitely deserved. It's weird that it would come at this time rather than, I mean, the NFL works on their own timeline. I mean, with the whole Rashee Rice situation, how he's still playing, and now with him being hurt, how does that affect his suspension? So the NFL always works in weird ways. I don't know why this was waited until, the beginning of October to be released. Maybe something else came through, but you would have thought this would have happened the first 4 games of the season. It definitely does. It affects the defensive rotation, but it also frees up and becomes an opportunity for guys like Tuhill, for guys like Smoot, definitely for guys like Solomon, who, he flashed a bit in what was it, the Miami game?
Jacksonville.
Or the Jacksonville. Thank you. But, Von Miller was kind of a non-factor in Baltimore. They kind of shut down the entire defensive line.
He played 9 snaps. 9 snaps.
Yeah. I mean, it will be interesting to see how that rotation is adjusted. I would like to see Solomon get a few more snaps than like the Tuhill, even though he's played pretty well as well. But it's for as well as he played the first 3 games, it definitely does affect the defensive line rotation, because he was getting, even if he wasn't getting sacks, he was pressuring the quarterback, and it looked similar to the old Von Miller of prior years, where he had that extra gear, he had that extra speed, he had extra moves on the end to pressure those quarterbacks. So it definitely does hurt the defensive line, but it does open up more opportunities for other guys to step up in his absence.
Yeah, for sure with Smoot. And I like Solomon. He's a very raw rookie, but yeah, he did flash against Jacksonville. He also flashed through the summer to get a little bit of level of excitement to begin with. Yeah, the timing sucks. I mean, it's never good, but 2 of these next 4 opponents are a team that you're going to expect to throw the ball a lot. Houston this week, Seattle, which would be the 4th game. They're slinging the ball. Geno Smith's had a career resurrection. What's funny is I've been thinking a lot about, I think about this almost every week. I'm like, all the moves the Bills made in the offseason, all the guys that we talk about so much, I always say, like, if you could have one guy back, who would you want back? Usually I land on Stephon Diggs, even though he's the best player amongst those who left, but he just wasn't a fit in this locker room, and that's obvious. They paid $3 million to not have him on this team. So I can never say him. A guy that we don't talk about that I kind of wish was a Buffalo Bill for the next month at least would be Leonard Floyd. It'd be nice to have him back right now. I mean, he is the same Von Miller type. He's got a couple sacks with the 49ers. But yeah, for sure. Smoot, on a smaller extent, Tuhill. For sure, Solomon. It's going to be an opportunity for him to do some things. Just bad, really shitty timing, man. Other thing too, not Bills Houston related, but Devontae Adams. Next time you're on this show, I usually have you on every couple weeks or so. I think Devontae Adams is going to be a former Raider. I'm relatively confident in that. Do you consider the Bills even a valid option? I'm like, yeah, I don't think so, man. What do you think right now? Does that feel like something that could happen?
Uh, I don't believe so for a multitude of reasons. One is the money. They would have to pull so many strings to be able to make that money work. Two, I am not. He might still be a Raider next time I'm on your show, but he might not have dressed as a Raider the next time I'm on your show. I don't think he's
Sure.
playing again until he gets traded, but I also don't think
Agreed.
he's actually going to be traded until a bit closer to the deadline. That way, the team that's acquiring him, unless they work out something where, I almost called them Oakland, Las Vegas, retains a
Retains
lot of their
money.
salary. Yeah, because I mean, it's costing them close to $1 million each game that he's going to be on their team. Uh, the second reason besides the money is they just got rid of a Stephon Diggs that's going to be in his 30s, that's making a lot of money, that is, if you want to call him a locker room issue, sure. That's kind of what Adams is right now with Las Vegas. He's kind of demanding a way out. He's over 30 years old and he's making a ton of money. The other name that would be more appealing to Buffalo Bills fans would be Amari Cooper. Cleveland stinks. Their quarterback stinks. They're on the hook with Deshaun Watson for years and years and years to come. I think Cooper fits more for what Buffalo would want as a 1-year rental. And I think it's a step above what they got with Kelvin Benjamin when they were trying to break that drought, but bringing in another reinforcement that you're not tied to for years to come, where yes, he's an older player, but yes, he would also help that room. I think he still has a lot of juice. I think it's the quarterbacks that's the main issue. So between him and Adams, I think Cooper would be the more appealing one. But to be honest with you, I don't really see them making any big moves in the wide receiver room. If they're going to make a move, I really think it's going to be safety.
I am with you on every single thing you said there. I'll say this though, in terms of if let's just say they want to trade for Devontae Adams, they can make it work because to what the point that you said, the Raiders have the cap room and the flexibility that they could retain a significant amount of his salary. But if you do that, now the premium of what you're paying is going to go up. Like they're already asking reportedly for a second and then maybe something else. The Bills do have draft capital. I mean, they got 2 2s next year. Brandon Beane picked up that trade or that pick from the Diggs trade, and I thought he was going to deal it on draft night to move up for maybe another first rounder or a player. Brandon Ayuk. So I'm like, they didn't. They kept that pick. He wants that pick. It's a valuable asset. But anyway, they do have the asset to do it. But I'm with you. I don't think it happens. I'll take it a step further. I'm relatively confident he's going to be a New York Jet. I just feel like that's where
Makes too much
he's
sense.
going. You know, it's funny too, because in my notes, I wrote down the same thing you just talked about, because I agree with you. Amari Cooper, to me, is the target if you're going to make that kind of move. Look, you said it. They stink. They're 1-3. They're at Washington, and they're at Philly the next 2 weeks. There's a outstanding chance the Browns are 1-5 and their season's over. At that point, you could get Cooper for well under $1 million. You make that trade 10 times out of 10. And I'll tell you, I get what Brandon Beane's mindset was this entire offseason. This is a year transition. We want to, fix the cap. We want to accumulate stock for next year and beyond. And they've done that. But if they're 3-1 now, if they're 4-2 or 5-2, even 5-3, and you're getting around that deadline time, you're in the mix. And you're in a division that is a lot weaker than most people thought, and probably Brandon Beane too, thought this would end up being. You're in the driver's seat in the AFC East. You're the best team in the division. You got an opportunity to go get an Amari Cooper, whether it's even just for this year or maybe 2 years, because the guy can still play football, man. He's a good football player. He's far better than any receiver on the Bills right now. Let's just put it that way, even though he's older. I'd be really disappointed to learn that Brandon Beane wouldn't say a second-round pick or maybe a third and a 6 or something like that if you got an opportunity to go get Amari Cooper. Again, if you're 2-2 and the Jets look unbeatable and you're like, man, I don't even know if we're going to be a wild card team this year, then I could get it. But this looks like a team, the Buffalo Bills, that are in the driver's seat. So it would be extremely disappointing to me if Brandon Beane stayed committed to worrying about the future more than the team that's right in front of his face this year, assuming that opportunity would come up, because I would assume if Amari Cooper's on the block, that there's going to be plenty of suitors for him. But the Bills got the draft capital to make something like that happen easily if they wanted to.
Yeah, and I also, based on Brandon Beane's track record, if that move is available to him, I do see him pulling the trigger on that because,
Sure.
If you want to call this one a transition year, yes, but also was, when they broke the drought, all that dead money that they had there, he saw that they had the option to break the drought there, and he went out and got Kelvin Benjamin. Did it work? No, but he proved that he would be willing to part with future assets to go get them. Last year, Rasul Douglas came up, and I know that was injury related that they had to replace Trey White, but he was willing to part with future picks there as well to go get a position of need. So I think based on his track record, he's willing to make those moves. It's just, will Buffalo be able to part with the draft picks that would take to acquire an Amari Cooper or, the long shot of Devontae Adams? But I'm with you. I think he has New York Jets written all over him, or, New Orleans Saints. I know those are the two favorites, but I think it's got to be the Jets, right? I mean, Garrett Wilson, he's a really good wide receiver. I just don't think he's a number one wide receiver in the NFL right now. He's super talented. It's just, when are you expecting him to take that next step? It's year 3. It's just, if you put Adams there and then Wilson there, then this offense might start scaring me.
I think Garrett Wilson is a number one receiver. I think Aaron Rodgers is not a really good number one quarterback.
Yeah, it could be it too. Yeah.
At this career. And I want to be clear about something too. I bought into this being a transitional year for the Bills a month ago. Right now, you're 3-1 and you're in the driver's seat for your division in a conference where, even though the Chiefs are 4-0, there's no supreme above all else juggernauts right now. The Chiefs got some issues, especially at wide receiver, ironically, as well. So to me, this is not a transitional year anymore. To me, this is the Bills have an excellent opportunity to compete for a championship right now this year. So we'll see what Brandon Beane does now or near deadline time if the opportunity comes about. As for this week, Bills-Houston, this is a game that a lot of people have had circled on their calendar for quite a while.
Why?
None so more, I'm sure, than Stephon Diggs. Stephon just wants to step on the throats of the Buffalo Bills this week. 4 games in, Steph's on pace for 106 catches, 990 yards. So he ain't washed up by any means. Is he the same player he was in 2020, 2021? Nah, but he doesn't need to be the guy because they have one of the most underrated players in football, a supreme number one receiver in Nico Collins. So it's not all Stephon or bust, like it felt at times, at least anyway, with the Bills at times over the years here. It's hard to say how much the Bills have missed Diggs on the field because they're 3-1 without him. They're second in the league in points scored. Josh is playing at MVP caliber level without him. But the cons, bro, Shakir's been really good. Keon Coleman is starting to show some more signs, but Samuel so far and Hollins, MVS, they're not getting anything to replace Stephon Diggs. I mean, that's just a little more patience. We're a month in with the new offense. It takes time to click. But I don't know. What are your thoughts going into this game with Stephon? We'll start there because, again, he's hungry to feast on this undermanned defense right now.
Yeah, this defense has not really had to they haven't been burned by the wide receivers they've faced. They've held Marvin Harrison in check. They've held Tyreek Hill and Waddle in check. They held Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas Jr. in check last week. The wide receivers didn't have to do anything because Derrick Henry did all the work. But Benford and Douglas and Taron Johnson's back. Who knows if he's going to be back Sunday? I'm leaning he's probably not back this week, but he's on his way back. Stephon Diggs wants to shut everybody in Buffalo up. I'm confident that he has heard everybody trash talking him nonstop about, he's washed up, that you saw what happened the end of last season. They worked him out of the rotation for a reason and so on and so forth. So, he's going to want to come out and just ball. I just don't know if he's going to be able to, but it's Nico Collins. That's absolutely terrifying me. I understand that Douglas and Benford are legit top level corners, but Nico is a different animal. And Tyreek Hill's speedy, but Nico is, he came out of nowhere last year because, he never really had a true quarterback. Now that he's got Stroud, Nico absolutely terrifies me for this game. The running game doesn't really scare me because they haven't gotten it going. But with Diggs coming in, I do think he's going to want to put up monster performances. I just don't know if the corners are going to allow that to happen.
Yeah, and Tank Dell's going to be back very likely this week. He missed last week. He practiced on Wednesday. So, yeah, this is a loaded offense with Dalton Schultz. This is a loaded offense with a lot of weapons. The Bills, like Benford doesn't shadow, like, say, Sauce Gardner or the other team's number one. He plays his side of the field, and I've said this a few times, the way he's played so far this season, he's been like a prime Trey White, a guy who really, you didn't hear his name much. I'm talking about Trey and now Benford because they didn't throw at him. And I kind of feel like that's what Benford has been right now with this defense. I just gotta hate the thought of it, but I gotta keep it real here. I keep getting these visions in my head that Stephon scores a touchdown and that end zone celebration and I don't know if you want to call it anger, joy, passion, whatever you want to call it. It is going to unleash. I might have a bonus bowl prediction where Stephon scores a touchdown and gets a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after. I think he might go so crazy if he scores a touchdown. What I think could be to the Bills' advantage if Houston's not careful. Stroud's a young quarterback. Stephon. And one thing you know about Stephon Diggs, besides the fact he's a good receiver, is he likes to talk. He talks to his quarterback. He wants that football. Maybe it could be advantageous to the Bills that Stroud tries to force a couple into him when he's not there. Because you watched it, Josh Allen did that at times with Stephon. Maybe he tries to force a pass that gets tipped and picked. Something like that. Not good news though, PK, on the injury front, because Bernard's back. It looks like he's got a legitimate chance to play. Teron practiced in a red non-contact jersey on Wednesday. I'd be willing to bet money. I don't think he's going to be back this week. In fact, I almost would be surprised if he's not back for another 2 weeks. I probably should have won an IR at this point, but we've known that the Bills they've been playing like this for a month now, so they know. On the offensive side of the ball, though, Deion Dawkins missed practice. Learned that he had a hamstring injury in that Baltimore game, and he played through it, which, by the way, if you watch the All-22 film, which I did, Deion didn't look right, and now it makes a lot more sense. But anyway, he didn't practice. Sean said it's kind of a in-between cautious, being cautious early in the week, and we'll see what's up with Sunday. And then Khalil Shakir did not practice either with the ankle injury. So now I guess it's now Von Miller, of course, suspended for the defense. But now it's like the offense's turn to have to go through some personnel adversity because I'll tell you this, and it's early in the week, and hopefully don't come down to it, but Ryan Vandermark against either Will Anderson or Danielle Hunter, that's not fun to think about.
Yeah, because I have it, my last line here, offensive line will be tested against Houston's defensive line, and they're definitely going to be even more tested if Dawkins is hurt. You saw Spencer Brown look silly. Osiris Torrance has stunk this year. This defensive line for Houston might be in that backfield a lot with Josh Allen, and it's a bit nerve-wracking, especially if Shakir is limited. He did not look right after that ankle injury as well, so you're going to need somebody in the wide receiver room to step up. And I'm not predicting it. I'm not making a bold prediction, but this could be the first week that you actually see a legit reason why they signed a Curtis Samuel, because they mentioned it after the game. Joe Brady has been talking about it nonstop. They got to get Curtis Samuel the ball. They got to get him more involved in the game planning. This could be the perfect opportunity for him to be involved if Shakir is hurting, if Dawkins misses. The defensive line for Houston is legit. So it could be a big week. I'm not saying go get him in fantasy, but it could be a big week for Curtis Samuel to actually prove why they signed him so early in free agency to the 3-year deal.
I will 100% say that the first month is Samuel getting acclimated to his teammates, Josh getting acclimated to him, the turf toe that he was going through over the summer. I'll give you all that. It takes time to gel, chemistry. I'll give you all that. We're going into week 5. And if Khalil Shakir can't go, the Bills need Curtis Samuel to step up. And if he doesn't on Sunday, then I think you got a Curtis Samuel problem, because those type of guys over the last handful of years, McKenzie, Hines, Hardy, they just have not worked out well with the Buffalo Bills. And if they need him and they got to rely on him and lean on him, and you're still getting 2 catches for 23 yards, I think you have a Samuel problem. I'll say this. I think this is going to be a shootout. I get that sense. I'm not ready to make a prediction because I got a whole Bills-Texans preview episode still to come on Friday's show, as well as the Sabres. Oh, we'll talk a little bit of Sabres, even though they'll be playing on Friday. So I'm not going to make a prediction, but I do think it's going to be a shootout. I'll give you one hint on where I might be leaning, though, right now. Maybe I'll change my mind by tomorrow. I think it's going to be a close game. I do think it's going to be a shootout, but I think the difference is those Houston defensive ends had the ability to wreck a game, wreck a drive with a forced fumble, something like that, where I'm not nowhere near as confident in Groot, Epinesa, and Smoot or Solomon or whoever the hell it is, not compared to Anderson and Hunter. And that's especially true if Deion Dawkins is either out or, compromised. Where are you leaning on this game? If you want to give me a prediction, go ahead. I'm not going to do it, but
it's I don't know if I can give you a score prediction. I do. After seeing them get punched, and again, it's one game, there's a lot of things that kind of got exposed for the Buffalo Bills that we kind of already knew, but I think, Baltimore just, shine a glaring light on all the issues. If Dawkins is out, if Shakir's out, this seems like it's Houston's to take and run with it. I don't know if it's going to be a complete shootout, but I can see, 27-24. I do think it's going to be a close game, but Houston scares me because of Stroud and Nico Collins, and they scare me because of the defensive line. So it will be a true test for this Buffalo Bills team with the new regime of, after you got your face punched in, how do you respond? Because prior regimes, this didn't happen with getting blown out. You mentioned it the last time we were here, how big of a streak they had without getting blown out by more than 6 points. That's gone, and it wasn't this team's streak. I think Jeremy White said that perfectly on WGR. This is not the same team that had that streak. This is a different team.
Sure.
We'll see how this team reacts to being punched in the face, and are they able to adjust, or is this more of a pattern here now? Are they gonna lose 2 in a row with Jets coming in, which is going to be a very important divisional game?
Sure. I want to leave fans today with some optimism, and I'm not being a homer or naive or blind to the fact that Houston's a good team, possibly a great team, and they got a hungry receiver who I don't know how well he's going to do, but I'm confident he's not just going to have 2 catches for 14 yards. Let's just put it that way. But I think this is a much better matchup for the Bills than it last week was.
Big time.
They do a good job of not letting receivers kill them. And Houston is a wide receiver strength team. Houston's got some issues with the middle of their defense and the passing game in the middle of the football field that could be exploited. The Bills, Josh did not have a great night, not his fault, but I'm sure he's looking to bounce back strong. They want this game. Look, it's not just Stephon Diggs wanting to kill the Bills. I promise you, Sean McDermott is probably not sleeping this week because he wants the Bills to beat Stephon Diggs and the Houston Texans every single bit as much. So I like the Bills' chances. And last point, too, and again, I'll have a whole preview show tomorrow, but even if they were to lose this game, I said before the 3-game road streak, it was not fun to say at the time, but I still feel that way now. If you win one of those 3 and you go to 4-2, I think you're in really good shape, especially the way this division is starting to play out. You lose all 3, you're 3-3. Question marks are going to be flying. You can't beat a good team. You're not good on the road. A lot of deficiencies on this roster will be exposed. But if you could get one of these 3 on the road at a minimum, now you're down to still being hopefully get 2 or 3. But even if you get 1 or 3, you're 4-2 and you're okay. Now, obviously, if you can only win one of them, you want to beat the Jets, of course. But this is a winnable game for the Bills. I'll just say that. I'm not going to go any further in terms of a prediction, just saying that I do think this is a winnable game for the Bills, whereas Baltimore, even though I picked the Bills, I think I had my rose-colored glasses on at the time last week. and I wasn't thinking clearly, but Baltimore's just a nightmare matchup. Houston's not a nightmare matchup. There are teams where their strengths, the Bills can counter. Because if Deion is playing and he's all right, the Bills got two really good tackles and it could stymie defensive ends as well. So I think this is a good matchup. Not a great one, but a good one for the Bills.
Yeah, this might be one where, it's good that it's a 1 o'clock game where you don't have to go to bed at halftime.
That is true. That is true. All right, guys. Thank you very much, PK. Buffalo Sports Collective, Bills, Sabres, Bandits. Make sure you check it out, man. It's always fun having you on the show, and I appreciate you, man. This was a fun Sabres. It feels good to talk about the Sabres. Appreciate you, buddy.
No problem.
All right, guys. And like I said at the beginning, if you are subscribed on the YouTube channel, please also follow us on either Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your audio podcast from. And conversely, if you only follow us, but you want to get some exclusive stuff, subscribe to the Talking Buffalo YouTube channel as well. Thank you very much. Be back. Bills, Texans, game preview, and bowl predictions tomorrow.